Carlos Alcaraz humiliates Sinner. Carlos Alcaraz's triumph at the Australian Open served to widen the gap between the Spanish tennis player and his great generational rival, the Italian Jannik Sinner. Both in terms of Grand Slam titles and in the ATP rankings, the player from Murcia is the clear dominator. The victory last Sunday against Novak Djokovic saw Alcaraz lift his 7th Grand Slam title, extending his lead over Sinner to 3, as the Italian remains on 4. A notable gap already in the real race to be considered the better of the two by the end of their careers. In addition, the 2,000 points for the championship meant that the Murcian made a strong statement in the fight for the number 1 ranking, opening up a gap of more than 3,000 points over Sinner himself, who lost many points after falling in the semifinals. Champion in the previous 2 years, Sinner's defeat to Djokovic was a moral blow on the sporting side and in his head-to-head with Alcaraz, which also left another surprising and very favorable statistic for Alcaraz compared to Sinner. The final of this year's edition drew 730,000 viewers on ESPN, 57% more than the 2025 final, which Sinner played against Zverev. Without a doubt, figures that reflect that Alcaraz is the most followed tennis player at the moment and that, together with Djokovic, they produce the dream final many had hoped for. So much so that the 2026 final is the most watched Australian Open final since 2017, when Roger Federer defeated Rafa Nadal in 5 sets. It is clear that the Australian Open has marked a sporting distance between Alcaraz and Sinner, as well as once again highlighting what could be described as a gap in interest between the two dominant figures in today's tennis. A double blow for Sinner, who will have to react and already look ahead to Roland Garros with the sole objective of claiming his 5th title and thus slowing down an Alcaraz who continues to be unstoppable in his pursuit of the great names in tennis history. Unexpected message from a coach to Alcaraz. Rick Macci, a legendary tennis coach and a fervent admirer of Carlos Alcaraz, once again paid a fine compliment to the world number 1, assuring that he is the best thing that has happened to tennis in the last 5 years. Above all, because of the way the Spanish player understands the game, to the point of influencing the coaches of future generations. Carlos Alcaraz continues to be one of the main topics of conversation on social media, especially after completing the career slam at the Australian Open. One of the regular voices when it comes to praising the qualities of the current world number 1 is Rick Macci, who has once again dedicated some lovely words to him on his X account. Carlos is the best thing that has happened to tennis in the last 5 years. His smile, his complete game, his unique game, has changed the way it is taught and reminds us that it is a game and that games should be fun, said the legendary coach, known for having trained the Williams sisters at the beginning of their tennis careers. Macci did not only focus on Alcaraz's style of tennis, but also highlighted his influence on the new generations, when it comes to how coaches teach the racket sport, who have the best example in the 7-time Grand Slam winner and his eternal smile on court. Carlos Alcaraz is right now the great reference point of world tennis, even more so after winning his 7th major at the Australian Open, which allowed him to complete his assault on the career Grand Slam as the youngest in history. Nevertheless, the victory is one step and now the road continues, since after skipping this week's ATP 500 in Rotterdam, the man from Murcia will return in Doha, where he will try to improve on last year's quarterfinals, but he will do so with the peace of mind of knowing that the ATP number 1 ranking will remain his with full legitimacy. The Spaniard continues for another week at the top of the rankings, with a 2,750-point lead over Jannik Sinner, while Felix Auger-Aliassime has climbed to 6th place and is the big news of the week. A major step forward that is due to the North American's victory at the Montpellier tournament, which allows him to move up 2 spots and overtake Taylor Fritz and Alex de Minaur, who, for their part, dropped 2 places. Life goes on after Australia and now the pupil of Samuel Lopez has returned to training in El Palmar, at the facilities of his Carlos Alcaraz Academy, with his mind set on what is coming next, the ATP 500 in Doha, which takes place from the 16th to the 22nd of this month, where he will try to improve on what he did in his first participation in the Qatari event a year ago, when Jiri Lehecka eliminated him in the quarterfinals. On the other hand, if he wins one more match in Doha, Alcaraz will have equaled his best start to a season on the ATP Tour with 8 consecutive victories. Carlos Alcaraz announces that his brother will be his coach. The tennis player assures that during the most important tournaments of the year he will be coached by Samuel Lopez, while his brother Alvaro will take on a more prominent role in some events due to his involvement. Carlos Alcaraz's performance since his split with Juan Carlos Ferrero has not declined. On the contrary, since the tennis player announced that Samuel Lopez would be his new coach, Carlos has reached new heights by winning the Australian Open. In addition, the incorporation of his brother Alvaro Alcaraz into his team has been an incentive, according to Carlos himself. In an interview with Marca, the tennis player confirmed that during the most important tournaments of the year, 80% of everything I play, or more, Samuel will be directing him. while in the remaining tournaments his brother will act as his coach. In some events, my brother will be the only one traveling with me. It's clear that Samu will accompany me to the most important tournaments of the year and do 80% of everything I play, or more, but my brother will be alone in some, Alcaraz confessed. For Carlos, his brother is a very important person in my personal and professional life, and according to the world number one, his presence at tournaments makes him perform better. I'm happy to see him in the box, more involved, because he gives me a lot, adds Carlitos. Finally, Alcaraz highlighted Lopez's involvement in his game. I know how long he has been working little by little, as we say, his whole life. He is a very good tennis teacher, and when I hear him talk with my father about what they shared when they both played, you can tell that they are both passionate about tennis. Chile will be Spain's rival in the second round of the 2026 Davis Cup. The team captained by David Ferrer thus avoids Serbia's Novak Djokovic, who fell at home to the Chilean team by 4-0. In this way, the current runner-up of the competition will face Chile away from home in the tie to be held between September 18th and 20th in search of a place in the finals. The Chilean team secured the matchup against the Armada, the current runner-up of the competition, by eliminating Serbia, without Novak Djokovic, in Santiago in the first round of the qualifiers. Nicolas Masu's team defeated Serbia via the fast track, after making it 3-0 in the first three matches of the series. Jack Draper blames Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner for his serious injury. My body completely broke down. Jack Draper, current world number 13, has put an end to an infernal period in terms of physical injuries. The Briton, when he was experiencing one of the best moments of his tennis career, reaching fourth in the rankings and even winning Indian Wells, suffered a bone injury in his left arm that kept him away from the courts due to the fault of Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner. The 24-year-old player was injured during last year's Davis Cup against Norway and, from then on, entered a negative spiral in which he has barely been able to compete during the rest of the 2025 season. In 2026, he seems to have returned in great form and is ready to compete again against the best on the tour. In an interview with Press Association, Jack himself highlighted that his injury was caused by the high physical demands of trying to close the gap with Alcaraz and Sinner. That was my goal, and my body broke down. I was pushing myself so hard to play the right way and hit with more power. And that simply became stress for me. On the other hand, he expressed his desire to return to competing at the highest level after the injury and to reach the level of the current world number 1 and 2. I'm very hungry to get to where they are. I'll do everything possible to achieve it. I think I'm a better player now than when I was playing a lot and playing very well. Finally, Draper expressed his hope that no other tennis player goes through a situation like the one he experienced. I wouldn't want any tennis player to go through this. I've learned many things during this period. They've definitely helped me move forward and be a better player. You can get there with the right mindset, and seeing this injury, I think I've achieved that. Harsh response from a former world number 1 to Muratoglu. Alcaraz would not exist without Nadal, Djokovic and Federer. Andy Roddick has explained how the careers of the three legends over the last decades have influenced the current generation, and specifically the player from Murcia. The comparison between Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner with the Big Three has generated a lot of debate in recent days. Patrick Muratoglu's words and Rafa Nadal's subsequent reaction sparked the discussion, and although both young tennis players are undoubtedly on track to build two historic careers in tennis, it still seems too early for the debate with Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, and the Mallorcan. At least that is the opinion of Andy Roddick, former ATP world number 1 in 2003, who stated that the comparison should not become something controversial. The former American tennis player argued that Alcaraz would not exist without Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, whom the Mercian would have looked up to in order to become the player he is today. He watched them. He absorbed them. He literally incorporated Novak's serve mechanics into his own. Each generation builds on the previous one. That's progress. That's evolution, Andy Roddick commented on the latest episode of Serve Podcast. These are the feelings of one of the greatest servers in the history of the sport. Roddick believes that the debate between the duo formed by Alcaraz and Sinner and the three legends of world sport is still somewhat forced, especially considering the indelible mark they have left on the world of tennis. What is Carlos Alcaraz's next tournament? Date, schedule, and where to watch the ATP 500 in Doha on TV and streaming? The ATP 500 in Doha 2026 will be held in Qatar from February 16 to 21. Carlos Alcaraz's matches and the tournament can be watched on Movistar Plus channels and Tennis TV. Aware of the challenges involved in staying at the elite level, Alcaraz has stated on several occasions that his main priority is to take care of his physical and mental condition. For this reason, the selection of tournaments he participates in is increasingly meticulous.